I tell people what I've learned more than anything else is take the journey you want to take. Not the journey your parents want you to take, not the journey your spouse wants you to take, not the journey your boss wants you to take, the journey you want to take because it's your life.
The secret world of spies is often filled with stress, anxiety, and lies. But when you stop deceiving yourself and others, you can begin to live your best life. Therefore, tune into this captivating episode with best-selling author, actor, and corporate spy Robert Kerbeck and uncover the courage to live the life you choose, not the one dictated by others. Hey everyone, welcome to the Forged by Trust podcast. I'm your host, Robin Dreeke, professional speaker, executive coach, former U.S. Marine, spy recruiter, best-selling author, and your trust and communication expert. Coming up next on the Forged by Trust podcast.
Yeah, because then I go to New York, I need a survival job, and who stumbles into a career as a corporate spy? But that's what I did. Being a corporate spy, you have to have kind of the ability to improvise and kind of change on the fly. And I'm here to tell you, 45 minutes, I can find out anything I want about pretty much any company on the planet. 45 minutes, that's all I need. Having to explain something for which there is really no explanation, right? For which there really is no rationalization. There is no justification. What I was doing was dishonest, right? It was not honest. And so that was the moment where I was like, man, I got to get out of this.
The Forged by Trust podcast is a show where we explore the essential skill of forging trust for building an innovative culture and exceptional leadership. Join us as we delve into the behavior skills and communication techniques required for success and learn from the best in the industry. Our guests include spies, spy recruiters, master interrogators, best-selling authors, thought leaders, and innovators who will share their insights on building teams, partnerships, and exceptional leadership by forging trust. As your host, a global behavior expert and master spy recruiter, I will guide you through the process of building authentic connections based on trust. Stop settling for less and learn how to master communication skills you need to move beyond transactional relationships and into mutually beneficial collaboration and partnerships. Today's episode, The Secret World of Corporate Spies, is with the award-winning author and actor Robert Kerbeck. Robert is the founder of the Malibu Writers Circle and three-time Pushcart Prize nominee. His first-person account of the Woolsey Fire was read by over 1 million people as an op-ed for the Los Angeles Times. Based on that essay, his debut book, Malibu Burning, won numerous awards and accolades. Robert's essays and short stories have been featured in numerous magazines and literary journals. A lifetime member of the Actors Studio, Robert has worked extensively in theater, film, and television, appearing in lead roles in major shows and earning several awards. His last memoir, Ruse, Lying the American Dream, From Hollywood to Wall Street, is a thrilling look into his career as a secret corporate spy. A graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, Robert resides in Malibu, California. During the episode today, we talk about behavior improvisation and using deep empathy, the techniques of a ruse, listening as the greatest tool, stopping the lies to yourself, taking the life journey you want to take, not what others tell you to. We are all the same, forging trust from George Clooney to OJ to the boardroom, and a life lesson from Yoko Ono. Hey, Robert, welcome to Forged by Trust. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your life's most amazing journey.
Well, thank you, Robin. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and what an intriguing journey it is, too. A lot of parallels in our lives, and you were this amazing corporate spy. We're going to get that into a second. And we were just talking to pre-show a second ago, and people are going to learn in a few minutes that you were, put the IQ side aside because your level of IQ to do what you had to do had to be exceptionally high. But you, with the people you bumped into throughout the course of your acting career and then your corporate espionage career, it's like Forrest Gump. I mean, you are literally bumping into amazing people at really right before they either hit a spark and hit a flow in their lives or to ebb in it is really pretty profound. But that kind of goes towards the title of this episode, which is The Secret World of Corporate Spies, based on your book that I just finished called Ruse, which is really an amazing look at something not a lot of people know, and that is the world of corporate spying, which required you to do a lot of interacting in unhealthy ways with people to elicit information that they might not, most times, even know they're giving up. But everything in life starts with a journey. And I don't think many people grow up saying, like even my own case, I want to be a spy recruiter. Most people don't grow up say, hey, I can't wait to be a corporate espionage spy. So Robert, where's that journey begin? How'd that all happen?
Well, first off, this is already my favorite podcast because you told me that I have a high IQ. So,
There you go.
you
Scores off
had
the
me
mic.
you had me at high IQ, okay? Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia. The Kerbeck name is very, very well known in the automobile business. My great-grandfather sold horse carriages before automobiles were invented. He became one of the first car dealers in Philadelphia. My grandfather took over that dealership. My father took over that dealership. I was supposed to take over that dealership. I'm the oldest son.
And I'm going to stop right there because already the curiosity is just spiking. There seems to be this passion in your lineage for things that move on wheels. And you didn't cover this in the book. I'm curious, what do you think your grandfather's and your father's passion for automobiles came from? And also kind of maybe segue into their ability to really get into sales. Any idea?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, the name Kerbeck was Kerbeckian. It's Armenian, right? And of course, I don't look particularly Armenian, but I think, my ancestors escaped the massacres and the genocide that was perpetrated by the Turks. And, when you come to a new country, when you've basically escaped with your lives, I think your senses are very sharp, right? In terms of survival. And so I think that there's something about that survival thing that my great-grandfather's instincts were really looking for. How am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to make it in this country where I don't speak the language, where there's always prejudice against new immigrants? Yeah. And, one of the reasons I think he changed his name from Kerbeckian to Kerbeck is Kerbeck sounds very German. Philadelphia back in the day was a very German city. And so the name, I think, it just sounded German so he could assimilate better. And I believe that he saw the writing on the wall. He was a smart guy. And one of the things I talk about in the book is, being a corporate spy, you have to have kind of the ability to improvise and kind of change on the fly. And I think my great-grandfather said, hey, wait a second, this is the future. And so he got in on the ground floor. He literally, one of the first guys he talked to about getting a dealership was Henry Ford.
Right. It's pretty remarkable that he had that kind of foresight. All right. So we have this father, we have this grandfather, we have this car business. What did you aspire that you think you were going to do when you were young? Say elementary school, middle school, what was the expectation?
Yeah, I think maybe I thought maybe I'd go, to law school, and maybe I'd go into politics. When you're a young person, you have ideas, but you haven't done the legwork, you haven't done the hard work, to know if that's a possibility or not. But then I got into college. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, which is a great school, but I was paying for it myself. And so the first couple of years, I was just working basically a full-time job while going to school full-time. So I wasn't having a lot of fun in college. I certainly wasn't dating. I had no money. And so at a certain point, I got to be an RA in one of the dorms. And then they give you free room and board. They pay for your food. They give you a little stipend. And all of a sudden, I could go and do the typical things that kids do in college. And I really wanted to meet, be quite frank, I really wanted to meet pretty young women. Right. And I said to myself, where am I going to meet, pretty young women? And somebody said to me, the theater, and they were right. And so I went and auditioned for a play. I had never really thought about being an actor. And the next thing I knew, not only did I fall in love with a young woman, but I fell in love with acting, and I fell in love with the theater. And, you come from a background, your family's involved in the theater, so you kind of get that love, that people have for the theater. And so I was doing a lot of acting at Penn and big plays and very successful. But when I graduated, I didn't have the guts to kind of move to New York because it seemed insane. I didn't know anybody that had been an actor. I didn't have any connections. There was nobody, nobody to guide me. And so I went to work for my dad in the car business.
Right. I want to back up again. You did something that was really pretty interesting. I think I was wondering if it had any kind of impact on you with understanding human beings. You were an RA. RAs that can be a really challenging position because you're dealing with people and problem solving. Anything that really stuck out to your time as being an RA to you by any chance?
Yeah, I had a great time being an RA. It was wonderful. I never had any problems with the kids on my floor. When I say kids, I was a junior, they were freshmen.
Right.
I never had any problems with them. And I'm friends with many of those people today, so, I really recommend that, if you're a parent out there and you're listening and you have a kid going to school or, recommend, being an RA. It's a great experience.
That's really interesting too. You're still friends with these people back from college when you were an RA. What made you so likable to them, do you think? What did they see in you?
I remember doing something that they tease me about now is that I wrote each kid a personal letter to introduce myself. I was hitchhiking across America and I would be on a bus or I'd be in somebody's car or whatever the heck. And I would write, these letters on pen stationery, which I had purchased at the gift store before I left town. And I sent everybody a letter, and like I said, a lot of the kids tease me now, because at the time they thought it was kind of weird, but now of course they really appreciated that, and so there was something about that kind of, I think, bonded us before we even knew each other.
That's huge. I mean, who does that? First of all, you hitchhiked across America?
Yeah.
What did we do that for? That's an experience.
Yeah, it's funny. I wouldn't recommend it. I think I would recommend being a corporate spy ahead of hitchhiking across America. And it's funny because I think this one of the summers when I was in college, I did the same thing in Europe, and the experience in Europe was far more pleasurable than the experience in America. There is something about America being out on the road by yourself that is frightening. It is scary. The level of trust, it was not the same. In Europe, I never felt any of those fears.
What kept you going?
Well, you're a young person, you're traveling by yourself, you're going to places you've never been before, you don't know anybody in the town, right. You don't have a lot of money, so it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, right? But there were moments that it was a lot of fun, but I also had a couple of situations that were scary, because you were an outsider. And people either, are suspicious of outsiders or they're looking to take advantage of an outsider.
Right. And what was different with when you decided to go across Europe with it?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it was because mainly it was on trains versus buses or hitchhiking. And so, and also I think because you were on a train, it was easier to connect with other young people that were doing the same thing. When I was going in America and on buses and hitchhiking, I didn't see a lot of people doing what I was doing, so that you were alone. I was alone most of the time. Whereas in Europe, there are people everywhere backpacking like that. So you're meeting people all the time. So it became a lot more fun.
Deprivation gives us great insights into ourselves, and it forces us to innovate many times. Any profound ahas while you're doing the one across America?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I learned the most, and I think most people learn the most from failure, right? From adversity. When things aren't going your way, when things don't work out, that's when you learn, like, oh, you know what? I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Here's what I could have done differently, So, I don't know that there was any moment that stood out, but it was one of those things. You're glad you did it in the end, but I wouldn't recommend hitchhiking across America. I wouldn't recommend hitchhiking across America by yourself.
Okay, there's a good one. Good caveat. In the last part of that, before I'm sorry, I keep flushing this one aspect out because it just came out of the blue. It's interesting. You did handwritten letters to the people that you were the RA for. What do you think compelled you to do that? That's really unusual for someone that age to be so outwardly focused and to go out of their way to really make these great connections.
I honestly, I don't know. And this is the first time I've spoken about this in many, many years. It's one of those things I kind of forgot about. Right. I mean, I think maybe some of it was boredom because, again, you're on a bus, you're in somebody's car and, so you need things to do. You didn't have a phone back then that you could bury your head into, right? But then again, I had purchased the stationery before I left, so I knew I was going to do it before I was on the road. So, right. So I don't know. I just thought, I thought it would be nice for them to know me and know a little bit about me, because, they were young kids coming to school and I knew that could be scary. And so I was just basically, welcoming them and giving them a little bit of a heads up about who I was and what I was into.
What a profound act of empathy. You are actually seeing the world through their eyes and what might make them feel safer, more comfortable. And the only reason why I was kind of fleshing that out a bit, because getting into the line of work that you're in, whether it's in acting or as a corporate spy, that's the ultimate form of empathy. What's the other person see? What do they experience life as? And you definitely are starting some early reps in that area. All right, so we've experienced the theater. It grabs us.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was working for my dad because, like I said, I didn't have the guts to move to New York, and
which is also another interesting thing. I don't have the guts to move to New York, yet I just had the guts to hike across America.
Yeah. And that tells you how scary it is to be an artist. You know what I mean?
Okay, right.
Because, look, artists, it's a difficult journey and most artists, don't make a lot of money, if any money, following their art, right? It is difficult, and, here I had this whole setup where the Kerbeck name was known in Philadelphia. My father's dealership was established. The placard on the front of the building said since 1899. I'm kind of into genealogy. I recently found an ad in a Philadelphia newspaper for the Kerbeck Garage from 1911.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I know. It was amazing. So there was a lot of pressure on me to not only take over this business, but there was a lot of incentive because I was going to be successful. I was going to have a nice life. I was going to make good money. I was going to, be known in the community, so to speak, So to turn my back on that and move to New York was a big deal. It was a really big deal for my father. But something about car sales, it just didn't sit right with me. There was, there's a lot of kind of trickery. All sales at the end of the day, you're trying to sell your product for as much money as you can sell it for, right? Which so that you can make as much profit for yourself and for your company, right? So that's sales, that's just the way it is. But there was something about it, it just kind of didn't feel right, which of course turns out to be pretty damn ironic.
Right, that's then,
yeah. Because then I go to New York, I need a survival job, and who stumbles into a career as a corporate spy? But that's what I did.
Hey, so let's talk about that. How did we stumble into the world as a corporate spy, and what exactly is that? Matter of fact, reading your book, I got a better dose of exactly what that was. I've known a lot of social engineers over the course of my life because I started seeing that, there is a parallel between those worlds in this, and you were doing this before anyone even called it social engineering. So
yeah. Well, we called it rusing, right? Hence the title of the book, right? Yeah, I only knew one person in New York. It was my college roommate's brother. He was a musician and trying to be an actor. And so he kind of, agreed to show me the ropes. And one day he mentioned this job that he was doing. And then he kind of shut up right away about it. Like he'd been told, don't talk about this. Don't tell anybody about this. But then he had kind of, inadvertently said something. And I said, whoa, hey, what's this job you got? You didn't tell me about this job. I'm broke. I need a job. I'm new in town. And so he sort of reluctant.
And Robert, what years were this around? So give people a frame of reference.
Yes, late 80s, 80s, He gets me a job, doesn't tell me anything about it. I go to the Upper East Side. And for your audience, the Upper East Side's kind of the wealthiest area of Manhattan, the old money area of Manhattan. And, go to a doorman building. I was living in Hell's Kitchen in a cave with two other guys, so all of a sudden, I'm in this doorman building. I take the elevator up to the penthouse. This woman opens the door. I seem to remember that she had a cigarette and a martini, but maybe that's just the writer and me exaggerating slightly. Right. But she invites me in, and it was one of the nicest apartments I've ever been in. Calling it an apartment really even doesn't do justice to it. It was, a penthouse. It was gorgeous. And so right away, I knew whatever this woman's business was, it was very lucrative, right? And we have a strange interview. She doesn't ask me anything about my background, my skills. The only thing she wants to talk about is why did I leave my father in the car business? And how did my father take that? Which really threw me off. Like she was asking about my personal relationship with my father.
And do you remember what you answered, by the way? I was just curious.
She said, how did he take you leaving the car business? I said, not well. And I was very flummoxed because I was kind of like, it's sort of seemed like it was going to turn into a therapy session,
Right.
But she was, and you're, this is something you know a lot about, which is she was sort of interrogating me, she was kind of doing a deep dive into my psyche because she knew what the job required. I didn't. And so she knew the skills that were needed to be a successful corporate spy. I didn't. And so she was asking me these questions, which in retrospect now I see why she was asking these questions, you know. And so I left. I kind of didn't think I was going to get the job. And then my buddy called up and he said, you know, you're hired, but don't get too excited because no one is able to do this job, you know, because every actor in New York City is looking for a decent paying, flexible part-time job. You know, because you could do this job for 2 hours, go to an audition, come back and do it for 3 hours, go to an audition. You know, we live in an era now where everybody works from home, or many people work from home. But, you know, back in the day, nobody could work from home. So to have a job as an actor where you could have flexible part-time and kind of work from home or from an office was a huge deal.
What do you think she saw that she thought you'd be successful?
Well, I think the car sales thing, you know, I think coming from a car sales family, you know, and also from an entrepreneurial family, you know, my dad was an automobile dealer, which is different from a car salesman. In other words, he was running a dealership, right? So he had the car sales skill, yes, but he also had the, you know, running a whole business, you know, and how do you make sure that you're successful and you pay your bills? And, you know, my dad's big quote for money, which I think is the greatest advice ever, is money coming in, good. Money going out, bad.
You got to keep it simple in life.
I mean, that's entrepreneur 101 right there. You know,
absolutely.
Like if you're thinking about starting a business, print that out and make a banner and run it on the inside of your office door.
That's good. All right. So she sees you, she hires you. What'd that entail? What'd it look like?
Yeah. So then, you know, basically I go out to train. You know, she had this woman that was her trainer, and I still had no idea, you know, what we were doing. You know, we all know the Russians spy on the Chinese spy on us, but most people, including me at the time, have no idea how much money corporations spend on spying every day to try to learn secrets about their top rivals.
And what did you think you were going to do? What did she explain what you're going to do at that point?
No, I had no idea. I thought it was some sort of telemarketing. You know, we were selling magazine subscriptions or Broadway tickets or some sort of telemarketing, you know. Okay. And when I get in there, I learned that what we're going to do is call corporations and get people inside corporations to release private information, secrets, you know, basically anything that we want to know that their rival, who's hired the woman who had this spying firm, has hired us to extract from these companies.
And typically, what were those things that they were asking you to get?
So when we started out back in the day, the thing we always started with was the organizational chart. Right. So, you know, now we live in an era where we have LinkedIn and, you know, you feel like you can find out who works where and all of that stuff. But, you know, pre-LinkedIn, and LinkedIn really did not take off until after the crash of 2008. So LinkedIn really didn't start to get going strong until about 2009, right? So it's only just over 10 years that LinkedIn has really been a thing. But before that, there was no way for companies to know who worked at a firm, what they did, what team they were on, who ran the team. And of course, the most important thing was who were the best people at that company, who were what we would call the rock stars, right? And what we would do is we would learn the internal metrics that the firms use themselves to rank their own employees. And that's something, again, your audience may not know. All corporations rank their employees. There is a metric that they use to rank their employees, and we would find out what it was. And at every firm, it would be different, you know, how they ranked their employees, how they listed their employees, and we would find it out. If it was a sales organization, we would get the rankings of the sales guys. If they were traders, we would get the revenues, and we would know the guy that had the highest revenues was the number one trader. If they were bankers, we would see what the size of their book of business was, how many assets they had under management. And that would enable, you know, then selling that information to their rivals. You know, when somebody goes in for a job interview, are they going to tell you that on a team of 22 that they're ranked number 20? No. They're going to go in and say, I'm number one on the team. I'm number two on the team. I'm number three on the team. Well, we would have the proof. We would have the rankings of the 20 guys or the men and women on the team. And so you could see who the top three people were. And so now you could literally go after stealing the top people rather than getting some mediocre person that is telling you that they're great. And so I always go back to football as an analogy. You know, Tom Brady, great quarterback. Well, what happened when Tom Brady left the New England Patriots and went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Tampa Bay Buccaneers won a Super Bowl, right? And that's the same thing in corporate America. They're looking to steal Tom Brady from the New England Patriots and bring him over to their team and win a Super Bowl. And I'm here to tell you, corporate America is just as cutthroat, if not more cutthroat, than professional sports.
So what makes that illegal then? I think that's important for people to understand too, if it is.
Well, great question. When we first got the job, or a couple months into the job, we all of a sudden began to realize, whoa, this is kind of dicey. Is this illegal? And so we went and we met with an attorney, and the attorney said
that she made you pay a portion of, by the way.
Yes, I know.
Pretty low on her part, but go ahead.
It was pretty low on her part. Yeah. And the attorney said that what we did was in a gray area of the law, and then he elaborated a little further, and he said a very dark gray area of the law. And what he was basically saying is, this area is so unknown. One of the reasons Penguin Random House published Ruse is they said no spy has ever written a book about corporate spying. Like, you're giving us the inside scoop. We've never ever seen it before. Right. And it was the same thing with the law. I think that, they, knock on wood, we never got caught. We had a lot of close calls. Obviously, they're detailed in the book where we were, under the gun and had some pretty big, agencies coming after us or considering coming after us. But I think that, it's illegal because you're misrepresenting who you are. You're impersonating real people, and you're doing that to get information that you're getting paid for that has financial value. And so, yes, that is a crime. Now you can say it's on the scale of crimes. Maybe you're going to say it's not that big a deal. Maybe somebody else is going to say it's a big deal. Right. That's not for me to say. I'm not proud of what I did. I think it's a hell of a crazy story. And so people seem to really enjoy hearing about the story, but it's definitely not something I would recommend for people to do.
Like hiking across America by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did you actually do to Ruse? So people hear, all right, so I was a corporate spy and everything. What did you actually have to do in order to be successful at that?
Yeah. So, at first, and I don't talk about this too much in the book, I don't think, but at first we actually went in person, kind of undercover, to do spying. But we very quickly found out that being on the phone, using the anonymity of the phone call, enabled us to get far more information than we could get in person. And so basically we stopped going out in person because, first of all, it was much more dangerous, and we weren't getting as much information. We would go to a bar, we'd go to the US Open, to a box where we knew a bank had the box, whatever. And we just weren't getting the information that you could get over the phone by pretending that you're somebody else in another office, usually someone more senior, sometimes much more senior than the person you're calling. Right. And now that person's like, wow, boy, I got a very senior executive on the phone. He's telling me he's having an emergency. There's a crisis and he needs my help. And boy, I better help because I want to be on this guy's good side. And so now they're releasing information. They're looking up information for you. They're calling other people to get information for you because what is everybody in America taught in the corporate world, right? Be a good teammate, right? Good corporate culture. So, if you have an executive on the phone and they're and they're telling you that they're in Washington, D.C. meeting with the U.S. regulators and there's a crisis, well, they put everything down and they go, okay, hey, Bill, hey, I'm here to help you. What do you need, buddy? And so we created all of these ploys where we would utilize corporate culture, corporate training to our advantage.
What were some of the things that as these people were getting more aware of, we have a leak somewhere, it's actually costing us money, which they're changing their ability to defend against people like you, which then I imagine requires you to really innovate and create something new, which is constantly keeps you on your toes, and you're really good at that. Where do you think that ability for your innovation came from?
I think, again, part of it was just in my DNA, coming from a family, that escaped, two genocides. I'm part Jewish. My ancestors escaped the Holocaust. I'm part Armenian. My ancestors escaped the Armenian genocide. So there's something about that that's in the DNA. Like, look, I'm gonna find a way to survive here.
Right.
And then, of course, coming, from a car dealer, car sales background, then getting into acting and learning a lot about acting and improvisation. One of the things we think about with actors is that they're good talkers, right? They have the gift of gab, which I certainly have been accused of having. But I think just as importantly, and even more importantly, is the ability to listen.
Right.
And I could hear on the phone, in your voice, in your tone, in your silence, whether you were buying my ploy, we call them ploys, or my ruse. Right. I could hear it if you were going to go with it and you were going to tell me stuff. And if I could hear you weren't, and you started to voice objections, then what I would do is we had a technique where we would put you to sleep. Because what I don't want you to do is, if you're questioning me, you don't believe that I am who I'm telling you I am, you're not going to give me the information. I don't want you warning anybody else in the firm. So what we would do is we go, hey, would it be easier for you if I sent you an email that had all of this? Oh, yeah. Send me an email. Make sure it comes from the company email address, because I don't mean to be giving you a hard time, but I need to know this is real. I need to know this is legitimate. No problem. I will send you an email. You'll have it within an hour. It'll explain. Okay, well, thanks so much. That'll make me feel better. And you know what? I got a lot on my plate right now. Worst case scenario, I'll have the email to you by the end of the day. Worst case, end of the day. I'm going to try to get it to you right away, but worst case, okay, no, that's fine. Just as long as I have it, And if I get crazy jammed up, you will have it on your desk first thing in the morning, I promise. First thing in the morning, I promise you'll have this. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Well, what am I doing there? Is that person ever going to get that email? No, they're never going to get that email. But I've bought myself the rest of today to find somebody else at the firm to tell me the information that I want, right? And I'm here to tell you, 45 minutes, I can find out anything I want about pretty much any company on the planet. 45 minutes, that's all I need. Wow. Because the weakest link in cybersecurity, in corporate security, is always the human being. And I just need to find one person somewhere in the firm that is willing to talk to me, is willing to tell me stuff, is willing to look up stuff on the system, is willing to tell me how their systems work, what the architecture is willing to, if they don't know something, go, oh, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm friends with so-and-so in this department. I think they'll know. Let me call over and ask them. So now I'm on hold while they're, in a sense, spying on my behalf because they believe that I am who I said, who I said I am.
Right. So being able to do this so rapidly requires what some call tactical trust, strategic trust. Did you discover any sort of thread with human beings in general that enabled you to understand what they typically would need to have that kind of trust rapidly?
Yeah, I would always say, people want to be your best friend, right? And, like the two things we don't want to have in the world is, we want to have friends and we don't want to have enemies, right? And so I would play on those two things. So I would start off like, I'm going to be your best friend. We're going to be friends. This is going to be great. We're going to be telephone buddies. You're going to love me. I'm going to love you. You're going to help me this time. But later on, if you need something, I'm going to help you. This is great, right? We love each other, right? Mm-hmm. And if the person doesn't go for that and they're like not loving me, well, now it's like, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to use the corporate cudgel. I'm telling you I'm an executive vice president of compliance or an executive vice president in legal or executive vice president in tax or executive vice president and chief operating officer, whoever I'm saying I am. So now all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I've kind of rattled this guy's cage. He's asking me for this stuff, but he's a pretty senior guy, man. Do I really want to make an enemy with this guy? This guy, like, he knows my boss's 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 boss, like, man, so you're getting them to think twice about that, right? And so that's something that we would always work is, we're your best friend, but don't turn us into your worst enemy.
Right. So we got a good dose of this, but it's also because there's a great need. You're working for someone who had this great look of affluence, and yet I don't think you were making all that much money. And what was the parallel world you actually was doing this for to support? What were you trying to do at the time?
I know it's pretty funny. For a long time we were getting $8 an hour. And at one point we had an assignment where we were researching the largest defense firms in the world. And we were obtaining secrets from people that had top secret clearance. Like they were giving us they were releasing top secret information. And theoretically, if I had been selling that information to the Russians or Chinese, I could have gone to jail as a spy for the rest of my life. But instead, we were selling it to other defense contractors.
For $8 an hour.
For $8 an hour. But again, we were young, we were in our 20s, and it was just a temporary job to support our acting career. And, as you know, because you listen to the book, I was a working actor. I was doing the lead in a play opposite a young James Gandolfini from The Sopranos. I did the lead in a play opposite a young Callista Flockhart, who's married to Harrison Ford. I got a rave review in the New Yorker. I got a rave review in the New York Times. My picture was on the front page of the New York Times Sunday Arts and Leisure section. So I became a member of the Actors Studio. So all of these things were happening. This was just a survival job. It was just to pay the bills. And of course, as time went on, my acting career kind of went up, and up. And then all of a sudden it kind of plateaued and then went the opposite direction. And that was the moment where I really kind of dove deep into the world of corporate espionage. And my earnings, went up like, so rapidly, it blew me away to the point where I went from $8 an hour to $2 million a year.
It's a pretty dramatic increase, I would say, way on the parabolic curve. Let's talk about the acting career for a second. So you're making some really good inroads there. You're starting to show some success. You talked about a few of them. What do you think was the cause of those successes that you were having?
Look, I loved acting. I was passionate about it. I had a good look, and I also had a bit of an edge. So, I was able to play characters. I was kind of a leading man, but a leading man with an edge. And in some of those early reviews and, some of the papers I just mentioned, they would compare me to John Malkovich or, Eric Roberts, or, one was even kind enough to compare me to Marlon Brando, which was pretty amazing. And I loved it. I just loved it. And I was passionate about it. I was into it. I worked hard. I had an acting class on Saturday mornings. And so I never went out on Friday nights. Like Friday night, every night I was preparing for the class, getting a good night's sleep, not drinking, not doing anything that, maybe a normal 20-something year old would be doing on a Friday night. And I did that for years because I was really, honing my craft, and I wanted to do really good things. And that, all of that stuff got me to, move to LA. And then when I came to LA, I started doing a lot of big TV shows in LA, Melrose Place and NYPD Blue and Chicago Hope and ER and Star Trek. And it was all going great. And I had a lot of crazy encounters that, we can talk about.
Yeah. I'm curious about a couple of those crazy encounters because I don't think that life is like random. Things just happen and we create these situations because of who we are and how people want as part of their lives. And so just pick like one or two or three that were just kind of a little interesting, because I got a whole bunch of them too that I just think are pretty profound about that. You were right there, right as they're happening.
Yeah. Well, in the pre-call, like you said there was a certain Forrest Gump element to my encounters with super famous people.
No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of them was, I get brought onto this TV show called Sisters, and I am brought on there to kill this character because the actor who's playing that character is about to move on to a new series. And the actor's name was George Clooney. And he was, I was brought on to kill him, and he, we were working together, and he says, "Hey, do you know why you've been brought on the show to kill me?" And I said, "Of course I don't." And he said, "Well, I got this new series called ER." Well, of course, ER is not on the air. Nobody knows anything about ER. George Clooney doesn't know anything about ER. Indeed, he is incredibly depressed, and we're hanging out, and he takes me over to the set of ER, and he's telling me that his career is ending. He's done 6 pilots. None of the pilots have been picked up. He feels like if they hire him for a pilot, he's the kiss of death. Like he's got like a dark, cloud over his head. And, I'm listening to him, and he's a couple of years older than me. And I'm like, man, this poor guy, he's really depressed about his acting career. My career is going great, because and of course, George had no idea that show was going to make him the biggest star in the world. And he was never going to look back, look back. But in that moment, before that show had aired, he thought his career was over, which is just such a fascinating, kind of, like, again, Forrest Gump moment.
So what's fascinating, though, even more so, is he shared that with you.
Yeah.
What did he see? Why did he trust you to share these, the darkness in him to you?
Well, I
Someone
think he
almost
was
relatively stranger.
he took me. We were on the Warner Brothers lot. That's where Sisters was shooting, and ER also was shooting on Warner Brothers, and the ER set was closed that day. So he knew that, and he said, "Hey, look, let me show you the set." And he was saying, "Oh, this new series, Steven Spielberg's behind it, and Michael Crichton's behind it, and I'm really hopeful." And so he's showing me the set, and he's very proud, saying, "Look at this, full-on hospital set," and and of course the set was great. It was incredibly realistic. But he was also saying, "Man, this is my last shot. Like like this is number 7. If this pilot doesn't go, I'll be 0 for 7." And that's what he started to share. And he was telling me about all these other shows, and then he really felt like when a show hired him, that meant the show was doomed.
You were definitely giving him something that he needed in order to open up.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
And that kind of brings it to almost a very different personality, because I thought your encounter with OJ was also quite profound timing and an encounter. You want to share a little bit about that one too? Because again, I'm going to be asking you the same type of question, is like, what did he see when he saw you? Because people keep seeing this thread in you, and it's amazing looking at the success that you've had because of your ability to do this thing called trust. So tell us a little bit about OJ.
Yeah, I mean, this is, the OJ story is, it's one of those things. It's all true, but even now when I tell it, sometimes I'm like, what? Because so many parts of it are just insane. But, I was, again, an actor, and actors, especially young actors who are trying to work, are not very picky about jobs. And one day my manager called me up and he said, "Look, I got a job. It's in an exercise video. It pays, $750 a day, They're going to give you free sneakers." And I remember I was so happy about the free sneakers because my sneakers had holes in them. And so I was like, I don't know. My manager's name was Bobby. I'm like, "I don't know, Bobby. I'm the worst dancer in the history of mankind. Like, I don't think I'm right for this." And he's like, "No, there's no dancing. It's an exercise video for men. It's O.J. Simpson." And I said, "O.J. Simpson? I love O.J. Simpson. My God, I grew up watching him."
Frame of reference, what year was this?
Mid 90s. Yeah, I think 94, 94.
Right.
I mean, to really timestamp it, this exercise video took place right before the murders.
Right.
It was his last job before the murders.
All right, keep going.
Yeah. So I show up onto the set. I'm like, okay, it's an exercise video for Guy. I'm told we're going to do push-ups, pull-ups. We're going to play some pickup basketball. It's going to be for dudes. That was like that what he was going to market it towards.
Right.
And I show up to the set, and it is a dance studio, and I'm introduced to a choreographer, and there are these women that are also in the video, and I'm like, whoa, I thought we were like doing push, and the choreographer's like, "Okay, everybody line up. Here's what we're going to do," and he launches into this like exercise routine, which was like a dance thing, kind of a dance aerobics thing, and and I'm pathetic. I'm like, wait, I can't, I'm, twitching and cavorting and, and the guy like comes over to me. He's like, how are you here? Like, what, and he basically is going to fire me right then and there on the spot. And OJ says, "Whoa, you can't get rid of Rob. Rob's dancing is so bad. It's making me look good. Rob stays." And it was so crazy because, I didn't kind of consciously get this at the time, but now I know this. Rule number 1 in Hollywood: make your star look good.
Right.
And my dancing was making OJ look good because, I'm sure he was a little nervous about this video, he didn't want to look like an idiot, and these women, their dancing was, they were professional dancers. They were phenomenal. So right. He needed another guy in there that was kind of lumbering, stumbling. And so somehow that bonded us. And so the rest of the shoot, I think it was a 3-day shoot, and when you shoot these things, you're there at, 8 in the morning and you're there till 8 at night or whatever the heck, so they're long days. And so, you spend a lot of time. And for some reason, OJ just took a liking to me. And at one point he pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, Rob, you want to see the video for this pilot I just shot for NBC? It's called The Navy SEALs." I said, "Sure." And he takes the video and he pops it into a video cassette player because this is, 1994. And he begins to tell me the story of this show that he shot. And he's like, oh, this is my character. He is a knife expert. So his character in the pilot that he has just shot is a knife expert.
Right.
Right. You can't make this stuff up. Right.
No.
And, so he, it just, so he, and so we're sitting there, we're talking, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, OJ likes me so much. He's going to get me a part in like Navy SEALs. Like, I'm going to get on his TV show now because we're like such buddies,
Right.
Of course, and then there was all this crazy stuff where he was he was sexually harassing a woman on the set in front of us, which, unfortunately back in the 90s was all too common behavior with, entitled male stars. And I pulled the woman aside and I offered to help her. And I said, hey, we can get the Screen Actors Guild down here and monitor the set. But, I'm sure she was nervous to rock the boat. She didn't want to get fired. She didn't want to get blackballed in Hollywood.
Right.
And so, it was a really disturbing look at the behavior, which, of course, in the moment when I saw his attitude towards her, it didn't click. And of course, I didn't know who Nicole Brown Simpson was, but when the murders happened and Nicole Brown Simpson's face flashed up on the screen on the TV, I realized how much she resembled the female dancer in the exercise video. It was shocking.
Yeah.
And so here, now in retrospect, I'm seeing him treating this woman the same way he was treating his ex-wife, with the same level of disdain, the same level of objectification. So it was a really just insane moment in time because people say, did you know that he was killed? Well, of course I didn't know. But in retrospect, were all the signs there? Hell yes.
Yeah. Wow. There's another one of those profound moments in life of just timing is just amazing. But again, it goes back to the theme here is that people just like you. I think it's what made you really successful in everything you're doing. So the acting career, I know you wish it could have been more, but as you've said in the book, it was good enough that you earned a retirement from the guild because you you worked a lot. You were a regular actor. That's incredibly amazing and successful to be able to do that. But we decided by fate and fortune that that was ending, and so we then went full-time Ruse. What'd that look like? How'd that happen?
I think it was, I booked I had the George Clooney thing where I booked 4 pilots and none of the pilots went. So, one of the things about, getting to become kind of a name actor is you need something that propels you into the public's awareness. So, so again, I started to feel the way George Clooney had felt pre-ER, like, man, this is just not meant to be, And the Ruse thing, corporations were throwing money at me. I mean, obviously, like I said, I went from $8 an hour to $2 million, and it happened pretty fast because corporations were so desperate for intelligence on their rivals, what their plans were, what their strategies were, what their products were, who their top people were, what they paid their people, were they opening a new office? Were they closing offices? Anything and everything. That information was so valuable that corporations just started, proverbially throwing money at me. And, it was a moment where I was like, wow, I could be a broke actor for the rest of my life, or I could take the money and run. One of the reviews described what I did as shank the man and rake in the bucks. And that's sort of what I did.
How did you sit with that? How did your family sit with that? I mean, this must be pretty challenging coming from, seems like a really good, tight family to then move into this area where we're going to do something not quite right. How did you rationalize that?
Well, I think what you do is you do rationalize it. And so, I rationalized it at first. I was only getting $8 an hour. I'm an actor. This is just temporary. Then I rationalized it. Well, a lot of the information we're getting is helping people get better jobs, right? So, if I put your name on my list and I put a star next to your name as one of the rock stars at that firm, now you're getting a phone call from some big executive recruiting firm to steal you away, right? How could that be a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. These were all rationalizations, and in the book, as I deal with, I have a lot of reckoning with the moral issues. And again, I don't, I'm not proud of what I did and I don't recommend this career. And I think for me, the big light bulb moment, it was when my child heard me rusing on the phone one day and asked me about it. And that was the moment where, you see the love that your child has for you and you see the innocence in their eyes because they think you're the greatest thing ever at that moment in time. And then having to explain that explain something for which there is really no explanation, right? For which there really is no rationalization. There is no justification. What I was doing was dishonest. Right. It was not honest. And so that was the moment where I was like, man, I got to get out of this. I can't do this. And that was when I really began to, actively scale it down. And then obviously, I have not been rusing for quite some time, because I wouldn't be a very smart spy if I wrote a book outing myself as a spy and I continued to spy.
All right. So we're inspired to shift and reimagine ourselves again, which takes a lot of courage, because you're providing for a family one way, and all of a sudden our own sense of self changes that. What kind of courage did that take to do that?
Well, I think it was a little less courage than just survival instinct, because at one point I was so down that I sat down one day and I wrote a suicide note. Now, it wasn't me writing the suicide note. It was this kind of crazy character, this person that I had met that I always thought would be a great character in a story or a book. And I had been an English major before I got into acting. So the writing thing was something that I had done long, long time ago. Right. And all of a sudden, in this moment where I was so down, I wrote this piece, and something about in the piece, even though it was fiction, something in the fiction was entirely true, because I was in that dark place, right? And all of a sudden, the light bulb went off. I read it to an actor friend of mine. He said, "Hey, that's really good. You should write a book about that character." So I did, and I wrote a novel. I wrote it in the notes program on my iPad. No grammar, no spell check. I mean, it was and the book, quite frankly, was pretty bad. It was pretty weak. But there was something in it that was completely true. And there was something in this character that was crazy and crazy fun and crazy interesting. And that all of a sudden, made me go, you know what? Maybe there's something here, and so I started going to writing conferences, started taking writing classes. I started writing short stories, because short stories are kind of a manageable way to write something. You write a 300-page novel and it doesn't work. That's a lot of time and energy, right, to put into something that kind of doesn't work. You can't get published, whatever. Short story, you can write 15, 20 pages and you can see if you can get it published. And if not, it's not that much time and energy. And to my surprise, I started getting all these short stories published. I got pretty much every one I wrote published, and I wrote about 30 of them. And it began to give me the confidence, like, wow, you know what? And I started writing essays, getting published in magazines. And then I wrote my first book, Malibu Burning, which is also nonfiction. And it's about the true story that my family, we had a horrific wildfire in Los Angeles, in Malibu, a few years ago, burned down half the town. People died, thousands of homes were lost, and we fought the fire and saved our house. 17 of 19 on our street burned to the ground. Yes. And LA Times asked me to write an essay about that experience, which I did. A publisher read that essay, said, "Hey, will you write a book about that fire?" Wildfires have become not just a California issue, but a global issue as the planet gets hotter and hotter, drier and drier. We're seeing fires all over the world that people can't even control. The fire department, they're just like, get out of the way. Right. And so I wrote this book, Malibu Burning, and the book did really well. And I'm really grateful that the community was so happy that somebody told their stories. Right. A lot of people think everyone in Malibu is rich and famous. I'm here to tell you that is not the truth. Malibu is a very small town, 10,000 people. And the people that live on the land side of the Pacific Coast Highway, that live up in the hills and the nooks and crannies of the canyons, they are not wealthy, famous people. And unfortunately, almost all of the people that lost their homes were on the land side of the Pacific Coast Highway. And so the book, won a couple of national book awards. I got a thank you letter from Governor Newsom for writing the book, from LA Mayor Garcetti for writing the book. A lot of big celebrities, Pierce Brosnan, Sam Elliott, all kinds of great people were, said nice things and thanked me and came out to events. And so that was a really, great experience in terms of launching me into writing, like writing books, and now my second book is obviously the Ruse book, which just came out last year. and that book's been doing really well too, and it's in development for a TV series, which is really fun, because I think Ruse, it's just a fun story. I mean, it's kind of a crazy story. It's a world nobody knows exists.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what's going to happen with that.
So Robert, life is an arc, and it always starts like we did at the beginning of the inspiration came from your grandfather, your father, and it does follow a thread throughout life, even regardless of the things we do to provide for ourselves and support our families and everything. But there is an arc and there is a thread. After all you've been through and you've arrived at the place now, what do you think that thread and arc has been?
I tell people what I've learned more than anything else is take the journey you want to take, right? Take the life journey you want to take, not the journey your parents want you to take, not the journey your spouse wants you to take, not the journey your boss wants you to take, the journey you want to take, because it's your life. You're living it, So, go on the journey you want to go on.
And what did you learn most from all these amazing interactions where people literally brought you into their lives? Yeah, you knocked on the door, but then they opened their door when you showed up. What did you learn most about people during this journey?
Oof, man, that's a great question. What's cool is, we're all the same. We're all the same. I had this, crazy conversation with Yoko Ono.
That was amazing. I know. That was another farce moment in the book. Anyway, keep going. I'm sorry. That was crazy.
Yeah, no. So I'm having this conversation with Yoko Ono while my father is on an operating table having major heart surgery. And we won't go into how Yoko and I got on the phone. You have to
read the book. It's a good moment in the book. Total coincidence.
And Yoko asks me, what do you do? And I go, I'm an actor. And she says, well, what kind of actor? And just without thinking, I said the burned out kind, because she got me right after these 4 pilots had not been picked up, and I was feeling like George Clooney, like it was over, And she said, oh, the same thing happened to John. And I'm like, what? Like you're about to compare me to John Lennon? And she goes into how down John was about the music business, how low he was at a certain point, how he had given up on the music business, how he had given up on his artistic dreams and artistic career. Right. And that's why he wrote the song Watching the Wheels, watching the wheels go round and round. And I remember I'm like, oh my God, this woman is like comparing my little acting career to the career of arguably the greatest songwriter, musical artist of all time, And so my point in telling that story is not to compare myself to John Lennon, but is to just say we're all the same. Right. We're all the same. John Lennon was down in the dumps, was miserable, was depressed, didn't know if he wanted to make music again, didn't know if he cared, didn't know if anybody cared to hear his music again, right? But he picked himself up, he recorded that album was fantastic, and he wrote some amazing songs. Unfortunately, he was murdered shortly thereafter. But the point being is that, we all the same. We're all going to have these low moments, and, we all should look at, what John Lennon did in that moment and go, you know what, I'm going to pick myself up. You know what I mean? I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to get back to doing whatever it is I want to do, because that's the only way you're going to get a little further down the road and get to do the things that you really want to do.
No doubt. Robert, if you feared nothing in life, what do you think you'd do?
If I feared nothing. Oh my God, I would be a singer. Yeah. I would be a singer. Yeah. Look,
that just rolled right off too. That's good.
Yeah. It's too easy because I can't sing at all. And clearly I cannot dance at all. So those careers are not happening. But if I could have it happen, to be able to sing, oh, what a blessing that would be.
Oh, that's awesome. Robert, what's something I should have asked you that you wanted to make sure you shared before we leave?
I don't know. If people are interested to learn more, they can go to my website.
That's where and that's the final question is, where can people go to find out more about you, to bring you into their lives and find out about your great projects and things that you're doing?
I steer people to my website. It's simple. It's just my name, Robert Kerbeck, KERBECK.com, because, you can buy Ruse, you can buy Malibu Burning. You can see a lot of the short stories that I've written. You can also see the You can also see the trailer for Ruse is up there, so you can get a sense.
Oh, I can't wait to look at that. I haven't looked at it yet. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
excellent, Robert. I can't thank you enough for coming on, sharing this incredible life story, giving people a slight glimpse into a world that people don't know much about. So I can't thank you enough for having the courage to share that story and being a great inspiration for others to make great connections with human beings.
No, thank you, Robin. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Forged by Trust. Remember, if you want to forge trust, it's not how you make people feel about you that matters, it's how you make them feel about themselves. And if you're interested in more information about how I can help you forge your own trust building, communication, interpersonal strategies as a speaker, you're a coach, or as a trusted advisor for you or your organization, visit me on my website, www.peopleformula.com. I'm looking forward to sharing my next Forged by Trust episode with you next week when we chat with the awe-inspiring author and coach, Joshua Medcalf, as we discover your journey to greatness by first chopping wood and carrying water.